Welcome to NEXTGames Elder Scrolls Online Dungeon Series. This video covering the Darkshade Caverns I on the Veteran difficulty. Today we'll be taking it on solo with the DragonKnight. I'll start with showing you the gear, food, and potions I'll be using during this run, and then I'll show you the Darkshade Caverns I boss examples, all on Veteran difficulty with commentary. First, let's go ahead and start with the gear that we'll be using for this run. For our monster set, we're using Slime Claws for the head and shoulders. Now for all the rest of our armor, we're going to be using the Medusa's set for its bonus. For accessories, we're using Mad Tinkerers and Ring of the Pale Order. And for our weapons, we are continuing the use of Mad Tinkerers for increased critical rate. For all of this run but the final boss, we're using the Ghastly Eye Bowl for our food. And we're switching to the Crown Fortifying Meal for the final boss just for some extra hit points. Lastly, we'll simply be using the Crown Tri-Restoration Potion that we get for our daily logins for our sustained potion use for this run. This brings us to the first boss of the dungeon, Head Shepard Lauren, who is the easiest boss you will encounter here in Darkshade Caverns. Now compared to the other bosses, Lauren has a very small health pool. However, he can cure himself and will do so substantially once during this run, which is the main thing that will prolong the fight. The Head Shepard also has some flame damage abilities that you will want to try and avoid. However, they are not that damaging to begin with, so you don't need to spend too much time or effort trying to avoid them. Now the Head Shepard will also start with 5 adds alongside of him, 2 healers, and then 3 Quama. You want to make sure that you take out those healers first, then the Quama, and then put your focus on the main boss. That should be all you need to know in order to take on this one. We'll go ahead and talk at the beginning of the second boss, Foreman Lothian. This brings us to the second boss of the dungeon, Foreman Lothian, who I think is the second most challenging boss in this dungeon, so you want to come prepared. Now, first thing you're going to see him do is put a red circle underneath the tank, which you will want to get out of immediately, as it will inflict severe poison damage and usually kill you within 2 to 3 seconds if you are not outside of the red circle. This ability is definitely the most damaging in this run, and is the one you want to be on the lookout for the most. The second he uses it, you want to get out of the range of that circle. Now the second most dangerous ability is the one that you just saw him use there, which there is a quickly growing circle around him, and once it gets to about a 5-foot radius, it will explode, knocking anyone in the radius down. Now I normally just keep DDing through this ability, because running out of the range of it is rather difficult if you are up at close range. But another way of dealing with this is to simply use a ranged weapon, such as a bow and arrow, or a staff like I'm doing here, and therefore you can just always at times stay out of the range of that nasty knockdown ability. Now you're going to start to see additional pools of poison appear around the arena. These are not as damaging as the main ability that you're trying to avoid, but if you're inside of them for any length of time, they can add to your demise, so you want to make sure that you stay out of those red circles as well. Now at several points during the run, Lothian's going to raise his hands and summon 6 Quama adds like you're seeing me contend with right here. Now these thankfully have low hit points, so either drop your ultimate or any other AoE ability to quickly dispatch with them and continue to get your damage in. The other thing I'll point out is after Lothian uses the knockdown ability, he will usually run to a new location on the map and then start attacking you from there. Use this time to both heal yourself and get back up any buffs that have worn, and then get back in to dealing your damage. That should be all you need to know to take on Lothian here. We'll go ahead and talk at the beginning of Boss 3, the Hive Lord. Here we are at the start of boss number 3, the Hive Lord. Now the main threat is the Hive Lord's massive AoE attack. He's going to stand still and slam his fist on the ground, which will create a large red circle around him. The second you start seeing this circle grow, you need to get out of the range of it, as if you're in it for more than 2 to 3 seconds, you will almost always die. Now from time to time, the Hive Lord also is going to kind of crouch down and then summon a whole bunch of Quama adds, which you will want to dispatch with quickly. They have very little health, so it should not be too difficult to take care of. Additionally, you will occasionally see red circles grow around you, which is where those Quama will grow from. Make sure you get out of that circle so they do not immediately attack you the second they appear. The Hive Lord also will randomly jump right to you and slam you down with a physical damage, and sometimes stun you for 1 to 2 seconds. Make sure you're ready for this and keep yourself healed at all times so that you can make it through these periods of time when you are stunned. The last thing I want to point out is there is a conal attack which he will actually slam down and hit and do large damage to anyone in front of him. Now this is not normally enough to kill you, but if you start to see him use this attack, definitely try and dodge to the sides so that you can avoid the damage. Other than that, this isn't an overly challenging fight, though it is the longest one that we've encountered yet in this dungeon. Now at this point in the dungeon, the next remaining 3 bosses are pretty much back to back to back, so be ready for 4 boss fights right here at the end. I will join you again here in a few minutes for the next boss, the Cavern Patriarch. Here we are at the 4th boss of this dungeon, the Cavern Patriarch, which I would say is the second easiest boss in this dungeon, only slightly more challenging than the first boss. Now really the only mechanic you're going to have to deal with here is a poison cloud will be put down shortly after the fight starts. Now as long as you have solid healing, such as our Ring of the Pale Order, you will be able to easily cure yourself through the poison damage this will inflict, and just spam DPS for this entire fight. You really shouldn't have to know much more to take this one on. In fact, Bastion, my tank, this is usually the only fight, besides the first, that he will live through. Okay, that's going to be all you need to know to take this one on. We'll talk again at the beginning of the 5th boss, the Cutting Sphere.
Change your strategy.
This brings us to the 5th boss of the dungeon, who's kind of a hidden boss, the Cutting Sphere. And the reason I say he's hidden is he's not really along the direct path. After the Cavern Patriarch, once you get to the top of the hill, you want to take a right to get to the Cutting Sphere as opposed to a left to get to the final boss. You only have to take out a few adds before you'll encounter this boss. Now in regards to taking him on, he really only has 2 main abilities that are going to do some damage to you. The first is a channel attack where he stays in place and whirls around. If you get within range of him, this can easily 2-shot you, so you just want to make sure that when he's channeling this ability in place, that you stay at range and keep getting your damage in. Now, there's another ability he'll use where he's still spinning around, but now is moving towards you, and that's what you see him using right here. This was equally dangerous, but actually more challenging to deal with, because of course you just can't sit at range and wait for him to finish. Make sure you continually run from him as this ability is activated, and activate your cures if you can't manage to get out of range of that circle. Other than that, this is one of the quicker fights in this dungeon and should be over relatively quickly. Okay, that should be it for this one. We'll go ahead and talk at the beginning of the 6th and final boss of this dungeon, Sentinel of Kugums. Here we are at the 6th and easily most challenging boss of this dungeon, the Sentinel of Kugums. Now before you take this one on, you have to defeat a bunch of adds that are in this area. Once you finish doing that, the Sentinel will start coming out from the large doorway that you see behind him. Now you do not want to immediately engage him. Instead, go around him and get to the door where you'll immediately see a random enemy spawn that has a fairly good amount of hit points that you'll want to deal with before taking on the Sentinel. Otherwise, if you use a strategy that I'm going to recommend here, as soon as you start kiting around these pillars, that enemy is going to hop out and really complicate your fight. Next, let's talk about the abilities you're going to see the Sentinel use. The first thing you need to watch out for is you'll see small spider droids appear throughout the arena as this fight goes on. Now as the fight goes on, more and more of them will appear, making so that the area that you can fight in is smaller and smaller if you are to avoid those green circles. Now those green circles won't damage you, but they will rapidly heal the Sentinel if he gets within the range of any of them. Therefore, you would kind of want to pick out a small corner of this arena. I choose this corner right here, and try and do all of your fighting around that corner. And therefore, if any of the spider droids come, you want to use times like now, when he's shooting wildly into the air, to deal all of your damage and take out those spider droids easily, so that you can get back to dealing damage to the Sentinel once he's done standing in place and shooting into the air. Now when he's using that wildly shooting into the air ability, you want to make sure that you're continually running in a circle around him, so that the bullets that are landing are not landing upon you. I find that when he's using this ability, it's not only a good time to take out any close by spider droids, but also to cure yourself and get buffs back up, so make sure you take advantage of the time if you need it. Now he has several abilities that he'll use when he's standing in place. Many of these are charge-up abilities that if they land, will one-shot you. Therefore, you want to make sure that if you're in melee range, you are always blocking so that you can at least mitigate the damage if one of these abilities happens to land. Now, by far, his most dangerous ability, and the one that you want to be on the lookout for at all times, is the one where he's going to spin around in a circle and chase after you. He's about to use it right here. Now, if you stay within that red circle that you see around him for more than 2 seconds, you will almost always die, as it'll do between 30 and 40,000 damage. If you find yourself in that circle for even a second, make sure you're blocking, which will help mitigate the damage, and then dodge out of that circle. Now, the one thing that'll complicate this is if you get caught in the circle, it's going to slow your movement speed down, making your ability to remain outside of the circle while you're running even more challenging. So make sure that anytime you start to see this ability be charged, that you just start running as quickly as you can so that you can stay ahead of that ability. It's the use of that ability that also is why I chose this corner in particular, as when it's used, I find it quite easy to stay ahead of if you just simply kite him around these 2 pillars here. It's a nice easy circle, and also a nice small area that you need to keep clean of spider droids. Now, as you near the end of this run, more and more spider droids are going to come, making it more and more of a challenge. You're going to have to decide yourself whether or not a spider droid landing near you is going to be a threat to possibly healing the Sentinel, or whether you just want to continue to deal your damage to the Sentinel to try and finish off the run. Go ahead and watch the last 50% of the Sentinel here to get an idea of the patterns that I use in order to finish off this run, and we'll talk again at the end of the video. be it for how to take on a Darkshade Caverns I on the Veteran difficulty. I hope you found that helpful. These runs normally take me 45 minutes to an hour, depending on just how efficient I am. Thanks so much for watching, everyone. Stay safe and stay healthy out there.